The University of Idaho killings captured the attention of many, going viral on social media, talking about what went down. You had Brian Kohberger, who is getting a PhD in criminology, be arrested for the murder of 4 college students. This had people wondering, was he studying to become a better criminal? What is the overlap between people pursuing a career in criminal justice and those who are actually psychopaths? Welcome to the conversation. I'm Jessica Burbank. Here to unpack this today is Joseph Tully, who's a criminal defense attorney. He was a public defender in Fresno for many years, top 10 criminal defense attorney by Attorney in Practice magazine, in the nation's top 1% of the National Association of Distinguished Counsel. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So let's
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Let's unpack a little bit. I think about cops a lot when I think about, who is a psychopath in the criminal justice system, these people who want to exert their power and authority over others. Can you say a little bit about how you got into this topic?
Sure. I probably starting becoming a criminal defense attorney, being a public defender, I had no notion that I would become a criminal defense attorney. I didn't study for it. I didn't respect it. I had sort of the same stereotypical views as anybody did. But in being a public defender and in seeing these cases and in seeing how officers who were taught are these noble people and never lie, prosecutors and judges behaved in court, it was very eye-opening and very disappointing. And then I wrote a book in 2018, sort of based on my experiences, wanting to basically air the dirty laundry of our criminal justice system, what it's really like. And this is really before the cell phone videos came out, before George Floyd. This really predated everything. But I really delved into a lot of the psychopathic, the overlap between psychopaths who are criminals and psychopaths who are in our court system.
It's really fascinating, people talking about those who are criminals. There's this general consensus that people who commit crimes are terrible human beings. They're irreversibly bad. But some research about psychopaths, people, most of them have experienced trauma in their childhood years. Can you speak a little bit to the predestination to become someone who commits crimes? Because it's sort of been debated, right? Was Kohberger someone who was trying to understand himself better and studying criminology? What's the overlap there, and is there reverse causality?
So I do think that there is a link between the fact that his undergraduate degree was in psychology, meaning he wanted to understand how human behavior or how humans think and human behavior, and then going into criminology, there really is sort of this trackable history of, perhaps that he's questioning, why am I like this? Why am I having these thoughts? And then he goes into criminology to further understand his impulses or his behavior, his thoughts. There's a lot of overlap between psychopaths and the criminal justice system. Again, Kohberger was one, coin flip away, basically. I don't know how he decided to get his PhD or to become a PhD candidate, but he could have easily gone to law school, right? And he ended up as a PhD candidate, but he was literally, one decision away from being a prosecutor that we would see in a courtroom.
Yeah, can you speak to, you were someone who represented, criminals. Have you ever found yourself in a position where you think opposing counsel could be someone who is a psychopath, or you've worked with plenty of police officers? There's this overlap of people who are seeking positions of authority with people who tend to be psychopaths. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So there was actually a study done in 2013, and I write about it in my book, where these researchers interviewed people who turned out to be career criminals. And they asked, what they wanted to be when they, were younger. And a good percentage of them wanted to be a police officer. And what attracted them was the badge, the gun, the fast car, the ability to go catch the bad guys, ironically enough, and the adoration that would come with them catching the bad guy. But really, at its core, it's fundamental that that there's a seeking to impose your power over someone. And so again, the disclaimer is that there are wonderful police officers out there. There are wonderful prosecutors out there. There are wonderful judges out there. And everybody's heard of that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts, or power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But what is a more important phrase is that psychopaths are attracted to positions of power. The positions of power are very attractive to people who want to exercise their authority over others, who want to, impose their will on others.
That's a fascinating flip of the phrase that I really appreciate, because this idea that absolute power corrupts absolutely might prevent benevolent actors who generally want to do good in the world from ever seeking power and doing good with it. So that distinction I really appreciate. Can you say more about why you decided to take the route of a public defender after initially going in as a prosecutor?
So I didn't start out as a prosecutor, but I wanted to go into internet law. It was 1998 when I was in law school when I graduated. It would have been perfect timing. I could have, gone into a very lucrative position. I was going to law school in San Francisco, right near Silicon Valley. But I moved to Fresno, and there was no internet jobs there. And I first was very dejected that the only job I could get was as a public defender. But as so often happens in life, miracles happen when you're least expecting it. And I do consider the fact that I have a trade of being a criminal defense attorney as something that's very important to my life, that I get to practice non-judgment, I get to pursue justice. It's definitely not about money. It's not a lucrative career, but you feel good and you fulfill yourself. And you were speaking earlier of, people, society in general have these thoughts about criminals. I guarantee you, if anyone were to go into a criminal courtroom where they handle motions, watch what police officers do on the stand, watch what prosecutors do, watch what judges do, see what happens every day. The executive branch, the prosecuting side of the fence has so much power and so much leeway that the system has become unbalanced, and our government needs checks and balances. That's that runs our government. That's what causes it to properly function. And because the scales are now tipped in favor of the prosecution, we're suffering a lot of ills.
Yeah, it's very fascinating because of this idea that the people who are criminals are inherently bad, but interestingly, people who are psychopaths are seeking positions of power. They could be the police who are responsible for administering the law. They could be the prosecutor who's responsible for trying the case. We see a lot of disparity across class if you can't afford cash bail. For example, you can't afford private counsel, and therefore you're given a public defender who has an intense caseload that can't give you the representation that maybe the prosecution can. All of these problems suggest that law and justice are not necessarily the same in the United States. And a lot of this boils down to the disparities of class, but there's also this element of people who are maybe psychopaths are on opposing counsel or are tasked with administering the law. Can you speak a little bit about that, your experience with that in the criminal justice system?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's a very famous book out a number of years ago, The Psychopath Next Door. And really what I've seen in my career is the psychopath within the court system. And I think people would be very disappointed to see how an average police officer behaves in court, how the average case that we see in court, 80 to 90% of the cases could disappear tomorrow and it wouldn't affect anybody's safety. We definitely need prosecutors, good prosecutors out there for, rape, robbery, murder, burglary, all the above things. But so many of the cases that are filling up our court system are just so minor and so petty that it's just really somebody being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if it literally were to go away, the world wouldn't be a worse place. I've seen so much lying in court by police officers. Fudging the truth is the norm. Again, there are good police officers out there, but from what I've seen from my vantage point in my career is that the good people, they don't have the power. The dominant police culture or law enforcement culture is us versus them. We're the good guys, we should catch the bad guys. And if we cheat a little bit, bend the rules, or, impose our will, so be it, because, the ends justifies the means. And same thing with prosecutors. I see so much pettiness and so much ego. Ego is more controlling of our court system than justice is, unfortunately. And you were bringing up that, psychopaths, they're attracted to positions of power, but who wants to climb to the top of an organization and have power over others, right? An average person really doesn't want to. It's more trouble than it's worth. The people that rise to the top or that climb their way to the top are they're after power. And the police officers, prosecutors, and judges are no different. They're all human beings and they fall under that rule.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Really appreciate your perspective on all of this. Can you tell the people where to find more of your work if they'd like to follow it?
Sure. I'm on Twitter as Joseph Tully Law. I'm on Facebook as well. My book is California State of Collusion, and it is specific to California, but it really has a broad range, and it could apply to any state and anywhere within our country. So I'm out there, and I welcome any and all comments.
Thank you. This is so important. I really appreciate you talking about it.
I appreciate you talking about it. Thank you for bringing this to light.
Of course.